everyone, and welcome. This is episode 358 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by Ryan and Paul as we do this on a Sunday morning. Got some things to talk about, surprisingly, I guess, for this point in the offseason. Usually it's the quiet part, but we've got awards being announced. We've got some Rule 5 protections that need to be talked about. But first of all, as usual, Paul, how's your weekend been?
Pretty good. This has been a generally low-key weekend. I got to watch the Badger game last night, which, like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's Oregon was number one team in the country, still will be, I assume, even after that performance. And usually when Wisconsin plays a team of that caliber, I feel like there's a script that happens, which is, well, sometimes they get absolutely blasted, which is, that happens when you play the best team in the country. Sometimes they'll stick around for like a half, and then they'll end up losing by like 2 or 3 touchdowns. And they never have this happen, where Oregon plays one of their worst games, where the refs are not great, but generally I would say calling things, with a couple exceptions, big exceptions, in favor of Wisconsin. Wisconsin got like some DPIs that helped a lot. There were 2 big calls that cost them the game, but it was not a good, well-refed game. But everything was there for them to take this game. And I think literally, if they don't have the worst quarterback in college football, they win the game. But they do have the worst quarterback in college football. And so they lost the game because he couldn't do anything. I've never seen a guy have like 7 batted passes in a game before. Is he like 4 feet tall? Like it's insane. That guy's terrible. I can't believe none of the other quarterbacks are better than him. It seems impossible. I don't know how you could play worse. So anyway, other than that, weekend's been great, but that did suck.
Definitely frustrating.
Basketball team was good, at least.
He wasn't supposed to be the starter, right?
No, Tyler Van Dyke was supposed to be the starter. Transfer from Miami, a big arm doofus, good at throwing the deep pass, tall, strong guy. Not going to actually kind of on NFL boards because he has good physical tools. Or now he's hurt, but it takes a long time to get through his reads and crap like that. Should have gotten Curtis Rourke like Indiana did, but alas, we don't pay attention to my metrics. We pay attention to something else.
Yeah, and already you're seeing some of the national reporters. I know on the NBC pregame show, Nicole Auerbach was already floating out there that Phil Longo is not long for this role. Basically saying, I don't know how you can go into year 3 with this. So, change is probably on the horizon, but we'll see what happens. But 2 games left to get 1 win. I don't know. Throw the freshman out there, see what can happen. Can't be any worse than this. I don't know.
Yeah, the Longo thing never made much sense to me because this isn't Wisconsin football. And I was asking Paul about this a few weeks back, right? I was saying, how is it that they haven't brought in somebody like from the very bottom of the Shanny coaching tree to come in and work on this and basically run like a Shanny style offense with the Badgers, because it fits perfectly with what they traditionally have done, right? Like that, it just seems to be a perfect fit. And I don't know how they didn't like arrive upon that. I guess there's things that are difficult, but it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it never really made sense to me, the hire of Longo, because Fickle and Longo didn't really know each other. He just kind of plucked a well-regarded recruiter out there. They didn't work together. Fickle's guy at Cincinnati ended up at Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, yeah.
So he kind of had to pick someone else. But
yeah,
big whiff on that one. Anyway, so I guess happier things on the horizon. The Packers are going to whoop up on the Bears today, so that'll be fun.
Let's not get cocky about this one. Like they should win this game, but the line has been moving towards Chicago, and there's a couple things the Bears do that could give the Packers problems. So let's not count our chickens before they hatch.
Sure. There's going to be some irritating turnovers. I guarantee it. But anyway, let's talk some Brewers. But before we get there, reminder, patreon.com/MKE Tailgate is where you can come in and support us, throw a few bucks our way. The $2 month level gives you the question priority, both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible, Paul's Packers podcast. The $5 level gets you that perk plus the additional exclusive content, including the Minor League Extra with Ryan and Spencer and Paul's mini pods every Friday. Ryan, you and Spencer just wrapped up another monthly edition of the Minor League Extra. What did you guys talk about this time?
We kind of talked about a lot. We wrapped up the Arizona Fall League. That was sort of the meat of the episode. But we also talked about something we're going to talk about here in a minute, which was the Rule 5 protection deadline is coming up on Tuesday. So we did a real deep dive into that. We'll do a more superficial dive into it on this. If you listen to that, you'll kind of already know what we were going to say about it. But yeah, we did that. We also just answered we had some very good questions this month, so that was fun. And also, we mentioned at the very top, because we were just recording like a day or two after, but the founder of the Beckham Stapleton Little League, James Beckham, passed away this last week. He was 95 years old, and his funeral was yesterday. I was just looking at that on. It sounds like they had quite a celebration of his life on Saturday. So. Guy who's a pillar of the Milwaukee community and did a lot for baseball in the city of Milwaukee, and he's going to be deeply missed. And so just want to send our condolences out from everybody here at the Tailgate podcast again, he will be missed.
Absolutely. And, I'm super proud that we were able to help out that league earlier this year with our annual fundraiser. Hopefully, Little League in Milwaukee's in good hands even after his passing. But yeah, he will be deeply missed.
Yeah, they have an extensive organization that is running things, and they will continue on, and they will keep going. It's well established at this point. It's been around for 60 years at this point. So, or wait a second.
Yeah.
It'd be even more than that. 60 years is right. So it's been around for quite a while. So yeah, they will continue on, and we will next summer again do something for this. Probably will look a lot like what we did this year, to be quite honest. We'll get all that worked out, but yeah, the time for that will be next summer.
Absolutely. All right. Well, moving on. As I mentioned at the top, kind of a busy week of news upcoming at the very least. So we're going to preview some of that. Let's start with award season in baseball. That's continuing, ongoing. In the last week, William Contreras picked up another Silver Slugger Award at catcher, as well as being named to the All MLB team. Something that's still semi-new, first couple 2 or 3 years of that, but nice league-wide honor for William Contreras there. And this week, we'll see the Baseball Writers Award start to get handed out. Jackson Chourio, of course, is one of the 3 finalists for NL Rookie of the Year. That's being announced on Monday. Pat Murphy is a finalist for Manager of the Year, and that's announced on Tuesday. So let's start off with that. We've mentioned before, we're not expecting Chourio to win just because of the skiing star factor and Jackson Merrill. I think statistically having the better, season-long, performance as opposed to Chourio coming on in the second half. But I guess, do we expect Pat Murphy to win Manager of the Year? The other contenders there are Carlos Mendoza of the Mets and Mike Shildt of the Padres. Paul, what do you think of Murph's chances?
I think he's got a pretty decent shot at this. I don't think the other two have overwhelming shots. I'm not sure I'd bet on him, but I feel like usually I kind of know who's going to win it, and this time I'm not entirely sure. The Brewers, dealt with a lot of adversity. That gets you a lot of cred in the community. He's taking over from an established manager. That can actually help your chances. The Padres and the Mets had, I think, similar runs and whatnot, but I actually think Murphy might win this. I think he's got a good shot. And the other reason I think he has a good shot is because I actually think the guy who wins the Manager of the Year award is often not a very good manager, and I don't think Pat is actually a very good manager. So I actually give that a little extra boost in my own brain that he is probably going to get it done when Council never did.
Yeah, so the closing odds on this, Murphy is minus 550, Shildt is plus 360, and Mendoza's plus 2,500.
So he is the favorite. Okay.
Yeah, Murphy's going to win this one. You have to remember these votes were all cast before the postseason started.
Yep.
So the fact that Mendoza went on this run, people are going to be like, how can Carlos Mendoza, who went 2 more rounds than Pat Murphy and beat him head to head, because none of that counts, because the votes were literally sent in before that time. So Mets fans are going to be big mad. Padres fans, as it were, are going to be big mad. But yeah, Murphy, I think if I was going to bet, I would bet on Pat Murphy, and you wouldn't get very good odds on that. So Murphy, it's going to be Pat Murphy, I'm pretty sure. So that's That's going to be interesting. And Chourio, there's no shame in coming in third on this ballot. I mean, this is as loaded
Stacked
a ballot.
class,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's an absolutely stacked class. And Chourio did get off to a slow start because, he was like barely 20 years old. Yeah. And barely 20. Like, he was less than a month from having turned 20 when he made his big league debut. He was a young 20. So, yeah, this is the way it's going to go. I think I like Chourio to have the best career of the three. So I've been playing OOTP again because it's a good way to numb my brain. And Chourio has turned into I think it was 2027 at the All-Star break. He had 30 home runs and a 1100 OPS. So Chourio has turned into an absolute like golden god at that point. So yeah, I'm very happy about that.
I think if Murph doesn't win, it might be Mendoza, just because the Mets were, the best team record wise in the second half of the league. So, and there was a lot of momentum there. Does the doubleheader to get into the playoffs count? That was part of their story too. So I think there's a decent shot there, but I do generally think, like, when you consider the expectations, right? Yeah, the Mets weren't necessarily expected to compete this year. This was sort of like their reset year, right? Before they chased Soto and everything. But just considering everything that the Brewers lost, and it did seem that Murph was getting some of the requisite national attention towards the end of the year to kind of generate that interest. And yeah, so I do believe he could walk away with it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Mendoza.
Well,
we'll find out.
I think the Mets had even higher expectations than the Brewers coming into the year. If you look at like projected win-loss records, I think the Mets were kind of considered to be more of like an 81-ish win team, where the Brewers were more like a 78 win team by most of the projections. So
it really overperformed a lot.
Yeah. Yep. So like even on that front, because the Manager of the Year award is essentially just which team performed the most above expectations, give it to that manager because he did it. Like, that's literally what the award is. And it's kind of ridiculous. And that's why it's weird that Council never won it, because their expectations were generally not that high. Like, they never came into a season, or rarely came into a season with like 90 plus win expectations during Craig Council's tenure.
Sure.
So you would think at some point he would have gotten it, but just every time somebody else jumped up. So it's kind of a silly award, but yeah, I think it's his.
All right, moving on. We mentioned, Ryan, you and Spencer talked about the Rule 5 protection deadline coming up on Tuesday, and you went into a deeper dive on the minor league extras, so folks can turn to that if they want more of a deeper analysis here. But I think we should mention it on the main pod too, because there could be some ramifications for next year's big league clubs. So I guess real quick, who are the candidates that the Brewers really should be looking at, and who do you think is actually going to be added to the 40-man?
Yeah, so the way Spencer and I kind of looked at this was we sort of agreed that Logan Henderson is the guy who's going to be locked in. And I'm looking at what Jack Stern wrote over at Brewer Fanatic here too. And he's calling Henderson the only lock here. I think Henderson, it would be really shocking if Henderson didn't get put on the roster. It's not quite Jefferson Caro last year levels of certainty, but it's pretty damn close. Like, I don't see any way that they don't protect Logan Henderson. They have 36 men on the 40 right now, so there's room here to operate. And there's also some guys like Brewer Hicklin that are still hanging around on the big league roster, and like Hobie Milner, for that matter, who are still on the 40, who probably don't need to be there, and probably won't be in a month or two. But Henderson is pretty much the lock. Coleman Crow was not good enough in the fall league, because he was a guy that we thought was a strong possibility, and then we saw what he was like in the fall league, and I don't think anybody's going to be jumping up and grabbing him, because he just doesn't seem to be back and ready and like a guy you would want to pitch in the big leagues for a full season at this point, which again is what you have to do to be on to be taken in the Rule 5. The team has to plan to have you on their big league roster the whole year. So there's you could play some games with injury and with the IL, but you still have to have them on the active roster most of the year. So Beyond that, there are some guys. A guy that Spencer kind of jumped up and mentioned late was Shane Smith. He thought that there's a possibility Shane Smith could be kept because he could be a big-time reliever down the road, but that's also, it's more speculative, and it would be a little bit surprising if somebody grabbed him and took him, so they probably don't need to do that. Another name that we talked about, Chad Patrick, was mentioned because we talked about the fact that Patrick was the AAA pitcher of the year for AAA as a whole this year, but his stuff just really isn't that good. And especially, like, basically the idea, what Spencer brought up was that the fact that the Brewers never called on him this year to be in the major leagues kind of tells you that they aren't super high on him. Right. When they could have, like, they definitely at various points had needs, but they never called him up. So those are kind of the guys that we spent the most time talking about in terms of possibilities. It would kind of be a surprise to see anybody else get added, but yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I've seen some stuff about Ernesto Martinez Jr. kind of floating around a little bit. I think McKelvey might have written a piece on him, obviously on the older end, but and kind of the lumbering first baseman type, which I guess could be considered somewhat of a need. But do you see him having a shot at being protected at all?
Yeah, so the Brewers did just re-up him for the second straight year. He was set to be a minor league free agent, and the Brewers kept him as on a minor league contract. So the fact that he was willing to do that, I'm basically just quoting Spencer here. The fact that he was willing to do that sort of signals that I think he doesn't necessarily see that there's like a big market out there for him, because another team could have, if another team wanted to, they could have done what the Brewers did with Blake Perkins and just given him a major league contract, put him on their 40, and they could have already done that. And they didn't. He decided to come back to the Brewers. So that suggests that market wasn't necessarily there for him. But I mean, certainly I feel like if you're a team like the White Sox, why the hell wouldn't you take a shot at somebody like Ernesto Martinez and just say,
no kidding,
like, come on, kid. Like, he put up a huge second half, was absolutely a monster in the second half of the season. And it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, he had been better in the first half, but it kind of came out of nowhere. But why wouldn't somebody take a shot on that? But again, it's a fairly limited profile. You are talking about a lumbering first baseman. But there was some stuff when we talked about him in depth a couple months ago in the Minor League Extra. There were some things I really liked about Ernesto Martinez. He doesn't strike out that much. His strikeout rate was like below 15%. And that took me by surprise. I was expecting to see, obviously a lot of Ks. And the fact that he wasn't striking out a lot, that did get my attention. So we'll see. We'll see. But I don't think they have to protect him. Remember, everybody always thinks that, like, you have to protect more guys than you actually do. Very often guys don't get taken because they're just not that.
Everybody's got their Rule 5 guys,
Yeah, everybody's got.
That's how the market works. Mm-hmm. So that's why they don't get taken as much as you think. Like, because yours aren't the best, even though you think they, you might pay attention to them more, but generally speaking, they're not. Everybody's got guys like this, except the White Sox. Who have nobody that anybody else wants at any level. Now, the White Sox should take everybody's Rule 5 guys, because, I mean, their entire team is sub-replacement level. They would actually make them better probably if they did. Then keep them all year. What's the downside? But yeah, that's why. You really don't have to be as protective as we often think.
Yep.
All right. I guess more fan experience stuff before we get to the Patreon questions this week. Should note that the Brewers game times are kind of changing officially this year. I'll cite the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's trending sports reporter, J.R. Radcliffe, for this.
Who's that guy?
I don't know. Anyway, all weeknight home games now will start at 6:40 p.m. instead of just, they've been doing this thing the last few years of, weeknight games during the school year starting at 6:40 instead of 7:10. Now all of them during the week will be 6:40. All Friday night games will still start at 7:10. Day games will start at 12:10 through May, part of that school year schedule, I'm assuming, and then shift to 1:10 after that. Saturday games either 3:10 or 6:10. So I guess just real quick, Paul, good change, especially for those with kids. Maybe you get out a little bit sooner, even on a weeknight.
Yeah, I think so. I think generally speaking, that's a good change. And I don't even think it's just a family-friendly change. I think, yes, it's good to start at 6:40 with the way modern baseball is paced. You're probably out of there by like 9:10 a lot of the time. That's good for kids. That also on weeknights, though, is probably good for nightlife. Not everybody. I have noticed a distinct downtick in Milwaukee nightlife on weekdays when I've been in town, which is probably good for everybody's general health. But if you can, like, if it's like 10 something and you are getting out of the game, you might not go to a bar. You might want to get to bed so you get to work the next day. But if you're out at 9:10 and you took the shuttle there, maybe you actually stick around for one or two. So I bet it's good for nightlife on weekdays too. So yeah, good change all around. The weekend I don't think is as big of not as huge of a difference really, but seems pretty welcome as well. So I think this is just smart. I think this is one of those things where the team has analytics for on-field stuff, but they also have analytics for off-field stuff. Right. And this is, I think, a result of doing that kind of analysis and kind of good for everybody all around.
Yeah, between the pitch clock coming in and this happening during the school year, it has been absolutely wonderful. I used to go to games and know that I might not get home until like 11 o'clock on a weeknight. And now I can feel pretty solid in knowing that I will not only be like home by like 9:30, but I will also like be in bed by like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And it's been a complete game changer in terms of going to games during the school year. It's wonderful. So expanding this to the full season, I don't think it was super necessary. I think obviously the reason that they were doing the difference was to try to encourage families to come during the year. But now they're basically saying, yeah, it's worked well enough that they obviously haven't seen, like Paul said, they haven't seen enough drop off that they're worried about it. So go ahead and just plan on it for the full year. And it's beautiful. Love it.
Yeah, and the day game shifting to just after a little afternoon, could be more field trips, more school groups, that kind of thing too, and make sure you're home before 4 o'clock as well. Yeah. So that's really nice.
Yeah, those afternoon games are basically, if you go to one of those, you will see throughout the entire upper deck, you will see a bunch of like an entire section where every kid and adult in that section is wearing the same color T-shirt, like they're wearing the exact same. So you will see, you're like, oh yeah, all the school groups are here right now. So it's a way that they get kids into the park and get them to go to a Brewer game. If they, wouldn't necessarily have gone with their families, if their families aren't like regularly attending, this is their chance to get kids to come in and go to a game. I'm assuming they give those tickets either away or at a highly discounted rate. So,
sure.
And yeah, it gets people into the park and gets them to see a big league game, and the kids get to go and have fun. And, usually this is in the spring as some sort of reward for being good. They, I think, often will use stuff like that as incentives. Schools I've been in have used it as incentives to get kids to do what they're supposed to do, and then you get a little reward for it. So, yeah.
A lot of larger daycares do it too, and so you see a lot of that as well. My kids. Sure. Had like summer day camp for the last few years. They're too big now, but they would go to a Chicago Dogs game every year. Same deal. And it's hard to get to a Cubs game and expensive to get to a Cubs game. But the independent leagues are very good for that kind of thing. And they're just loaded with kids wearing the same T-shirts over and over again.
They could go to White Sox games. There's plenty of space there these days.
Sure.
They could.
All right. Similarly, on the fan experience note, we also had the release of the fan giveaway dates, always highly anticipated every offseason to see what's going to be given away. Lucre's Suitcase, our first Patreon question this week, is dealing with that. So writing, as a Brewer fan from the west side of the state, what giveaways would you target in 2025 if you only go to a couple of games per year. And I think this is a good one because I am originally from the La Crosse area. I'd get to maybe one game a year every couple of years. So you really kind of have to pick and choose. So we've got a screenshot here of the giveaways. So we've got a long sleeve hoodie on April 5th. I will say the lightweight long sleeve hoodies always my pick because they are fantastic quality and they last a long time. And they're a lot more comfortable than a heavy hoodie. So that's always my pick. But April 14th, we've got the 414 day shirt. April 19th, the replica football jersey. May 17th, the cribbage board. The Brewers really leaning into the cribbage thing.
Yeah.
Vinny Rottino and Jeff Leffering here.
That is mine, just to jump ahead here. I want that cribbage board. I always like the ones that are a little unique. Like, there's obviously always going to be jerseys and bobbleheads and stuff like that. But I love the euchre alarm clock, and I want the cribbage board too.
Yes, absolutely. Chourio Jersey Day, June 7th. That'll be a popular one, I bet. T-shirt Tuesday, June 10th, Wisconsin Artist Series. There's a Barrelman cooler for ages 21 and over on June 15th.
This one,
Ryan seems all about that.
Yeah, I love the Barrelman logo. I was trying to find a picture of it. Are there pictures of this out there? And this is also old school because this is what like baseball giveaways used to be. Coolers, like that's what they would give away. I think Steve still uses his that he got in like the 80s at County Stadium. He still uses it as his tailgate cooler when he goes tailgating. Like, so awesome. Those definitely hold up over time. So that's kicking it old school, but also that would be my pick.
Yep.
Running through a few of the other highlights, we've got a Pat Murphy bobble, June 28th, a Brewers 90s replica jersey on July 12th. So you can get a Motor Bame jersey, I guess. And I'm guessing it's just generic. It's not like you're going to get like a Dave Nielsen jersey, right? Bryce Terang platinum glove bobblehead, a Brewers umbrella in August. Christian Yelich seems like he has a bobble every year. There's another one in August. Crew neck sweatshirt in September as we get into sweater season there. So I guess, Paul, anything beyond the cribbage board jump out to you on this list?
Oh, and the cooler, obviously.
And the cooler, yeah.
The Chourio replica jersey would be my other one. Just get in early, that'll be a good one to get, whether you are a collector or want to wear it to games. And I will avoid Pat Murphy bobblehead. I have no use for that. I don't want to display it anywhere. It won't be worth anything on the secondary market. So I will avoid Saturday, June 28th as a game.
Ryan, how about you?
I mean, I don't know. The platinum glove bobble's probably pretty cool. I have the George Scott one where it has a stack of 5 gold gloves. That one, cool. I have that one somewhere in my cabinet over there. It's definitely in there. So yeah, that one could potentially be interesting. I haven't seen pictures of any of this stuff though.
Yeah, I have, I think, a Ryan Braun 30-30 season one where he's got like the silver slugger and he's holding a base too. That's pretty cool. So like, when you get the ones of, historic or at least notable occasions, I think those are pretty cool. I agree. The Pat Murphy one's probably going to be sitting on a shelf in a Milwaukee area Goodwill in a few years, but get that one for $2 later on. I've gotten plenty of Brewers bobbleheads at like flea markets and stuff like that way. So I'll just look for the secondary market on that. But yeah, lots of cool stuff. I'm sure they always typically add stuff too, right? So there might be some more coming up, but definitely a good look ahead of the season to start planning ahead. All right, let's move on to other Patreon questions this week. We've got a lot of good ones. Let's start with Devin Bearwolf, who's asking about the Devin Williams situation. We talked about it the other week. The Brewers declining his $10.5 million option, thinking they could save a few million going to arbitration. So Devin's question this week asking, how shocked are you that Devin Williams hasn't come out publicly and bashed the Brewers for cutting his salary? Devin's never been one to mince his thoughts, Paul, but also probably not good strategy to just bash the team when you still have an RB hearing on the schedule.
Correct. So, and this is not like an in-the-moment kind of thing. Like maybe if someone had been standing next to Devin Williams when this news was announced, they would have gotten something like that out of him. Mm-hmm. But, if you have time to talk to your agent and have cooler heads prevail, then you don't do that because it could cost you money, not only in arbitration, but on the next markets that you're going to be entering. So you don't want to do that kind of thing. So it's not that surprising. It's pretty common to not comment on this. It's also business as usual, and I suspect that both Devin and the Brewers understand their situations very well at this point. So nobody's going to get mad at anybody. They will give polite handshakes like divorced parents do, and that'll be that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that we're making a little bit much of this. There's a lot of water under the bridge, obviously, between Devin and the Brewers, but also I think that's mostly what it is water under the bridge at this point. Is like it just doesn't behoove him to say anything about this. And I would suspect his agent told him months ago that this was likely to happen, that like he's probably known this since the season was even going on, that option wasn't likely to get picked up because of the fact that he missed so much time, that this is probably the least surprising thing to him in the world. So there's also that just this isn't a surprise. This is just what would have been expected by him and his agent. So yeah, it's kind of going to be my answer to the next question too, but yeah.
Ryan, like you mentioned, similar question. Chad Fairs asking, the business and math seem to have made sense for them to decline the option on Williams, assuming he will be traded. But if you were trying to attract free agents, how would you sell them on the Brewers versus another team, assuming equal monetary offers? Does the pitching lab and the prospect of being quote unquote shined up for your next free agency balance out with how they treat players in arbitration?
So first of all, while the Brewers are arbitration sharks, they're hardly unique in that space. You can't really sell your team on being soft in arbitration. In fact, you even if you did that, you would just sound like you were either lying or incompetent. So it's every front office does what they're legally permissible to do to save money most of the time. Now, they will occasionally pay out bonuses that people have agreed to if people come up like a tad short, like a couple AB short or like something like that. If they were injured, that does happen occasionally, but it's pretty rare. And aside from all of this, the Brewers are always going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball in the all things being equal game, because Milwaukee is not generally perceived as a super desirable place to go by professional athletes. And don't all you who live there get mad at me for that. It is just the reality of the situation. I know it's fun, but not everybody agrees with that. So
terrible city.
Yes, awful city, as we've heard many athletes say. Haunted hotels, not a lot of clubs.
Sleep with the bat. Yep.
Yeah. So that's going to be honestly a much bigger factor than a lot of things, and the Brewers are often going to either have to A, pay more to get people as a result, or B, go on the bargain basement a little bit with guys nobody else really wants as a 1-year reclamation project, which they do with some frequency. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the way that they treat people in RB is not going to be a big deal. Clubhouse culture is going to be a lot more important than that kind of thing is. Players expect teams to be sharks. They don't want garbage clubhouses with bad facilities and bad guys around. The Brewers, I think, do generally a pretty good job of that, although lately we've heard whispers back and forth on that. But, Willie's a good clubhouse leader. Seemed like they all got along. That stuff goes a long way, too. But, yeah, nickel and diming in the process that has been established to nickel and dime players that isn't going to move the needle at all.
Yep, I would echo all of that. That was basically what I was going to say, is that it gets overrated because all teams behave like sharks when it comes to arbitration. And so this is just not really a thing. I will say that the idea of being shined up for the next free agency, we have now seen with specifically this Colin Ray situation, that teams don't necessarily buy into. If the Brewers turn you into a cromulent big leaguer, other teams don't necessarily buy that they'll be able to replicate the Brewers' success, because I think they understand that what the Brewers are doing is somewhat unique and that they're not necessarily going to get the same production out of Colin Ray that the Brewers did. So I don't even know how much that necessarily works. I think there are obviously real things. We talked about this last week, that there are real things that the pitching lab does in terms of helping guys to become better pitchers and improving their stuff. But not even all of that is necessarily sticky from team to team. So this is, one big thing that the Brewers can generally offer is, one, they can offer the track record of, hey, we've been in the playoffs. If you want to be in the playoffs, we're a contender. Like, you can come here, and if you like winning, we can offer that because we have an established track record now for a long time of winning. So that's a thing that they can offer that not every team can offer. And they can also generally offer some playing time. They can make some roster moves that are going to open up some playing time and offer guys the ability to play. Just the way that they do their roster shuffle, that's a thing that they can also generally offer guys, is the opportunity to get on the field. And that's a big deal for a lot of guys who are in make good contract situations, guys who want to prove that they are good so they can hit and get a bigger contract next time. The ability to play is key and something that they really look for, and the Brewers often can offer that. So that's also helpful.
Both of those things, the playing time and just the extended run of success, are part of what drew Rhys Hoskins to the Brewers too. Like that made that possible. And it's kind of weird to think about when you think of the history of the Brewers, that sustained success is a selling point, but it really can be.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Couple more free agency related questions. Steve DeRozier asking this week, is there any sense in the Brewers pursuing a contract with Christian Walker with Hoskins on the roster? I've seen a couple of free agent projections with him going to the Brewers, and as much as I like him, I don't see how it works with Yelich likely getting a lot of DH at bats. I like Christian Walker just fine, Paul, but I'm not sure it works with, assuming Hoskins is locked in.
I think I suggested trading for Christian Walker at the deadline last year, if memory serves.
Yeah, several years probably, because he's been good.
Yeah, he's been good. He is getting up there a little bit. He'll be 34 next year. I'd like him pretty well. I agree he doesn't really fit. I would run a weird team where I would sign guys like this anyway, because I do feel like, first of all, we're all assuming that Yelich is going to be doing more DHing and also playing next year. My assumption would be Yelich is going to play like a month and a half next year. That is my ongoing assumption for Christian Yelich.
Right.
And he can stand in left field and do it. And I'm not even sure playing DH is that helpful for Christian, because I feel like it's the swing that hurts his back, not lumbering around the outfield slowly. So I would be totally fine just getting another no field bat guy. And Walker is one of the better ones available. He's had a 120 OPS plus 3 consecutive years. He's been remarkably consistent. He is playing slightly at altitude in Arizona, but I think he's pretty fine. I would actually do it, but they won't, so it doesn't matter. He is a good free agent to target if you need some light hitting added to your lineup. I would like to have him on the team. He won't be, though, so we don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I think there's just other needs that are more pressing than a guy who's really limited to first base. And because they already have Rhys Hoskins, they already have Christian Yelich. I think there's, in terms of paying money, you're going to spend your money elsewhere if you're going to spend money, which we don't know how much money they're going to spend. So
yeah, and he's right-handed, so like it doesn't even like platoon with Rhys Hoskins well. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, this in another year in another formulation, had Rhys Hoskins had the year we all hoped he had, and he had elected for free agency, I think we would have a very different stance. We would all be talking about Christian Walker as, hey, that really could make sense. But given Hoskins' presence, and especially with Yelich's injury, I think no.
Another old friend who's a free agent in this question from Baseball Needs More Chest Lettuce, asking, is there anything left in the tank on Luis Urias? Enough that a reunion there would be exciting to you all. Oh, man, Ryan, Luis has fallen far away from that 70 hit tool.
Yeah, so it's that is a callback. That is well done, James. All right, so Urias, I'm looking at this. He hit 191, 303, 394 in 94 at bats last year. Yeah. Guess what that was for an OPS plus, though? He had a 696 OPS last year because he was playing at Seattle. Guess what that was for an OPS plus?
Like 92.
105. It was
105.
Yeah, he's got a 107 WRC.
I know that park sucks, but good God.
Yeah. So I think this is one of those classic situations of we have to remember how bad the hitting environment really is right now in the big leagues, and especially in Seattle. I mean, that park just seems to crush the souls of hitters. Like Julio Rodriguez is probably very much questioning what he did to himself by signing that long-term contract there, because it's that park just seems to take it out of hitters. And I guess it's because it has a roof, but it's open air. It's always exposed to the open air, so you get that heavy marine layer air in there, and it just, I think, saps the ball of travel. And so anyways, I don't think so, because we've done that, and I don't know. There's some weird vibes about that whole situation. I don't know. I don't know Urias. I don't know any specifics of like what he is as a player and all of that, but I can't see this. I think it would be extremely unlikely. But then again, at the right price, you never know.
My problem with him is I just don't think his bat, even in the best case scenario, really carries third very well. However, if you want to make the case for him, Luis is a righty and playing in that stupid park in Seattle. It actually looks like, even taking into account the Seattle factor, that he still hits lefties pretty well, if nothing else. Like he actually over the last couple of years has had decent power and even decent on base percentages, Seattle notwithstanding, against lefties. And so his hitting's been okay. It's not good for a third baseman, but you could probably get some bench value out of Luis Urias if you were coming at this with like fresh eyes and just wanted kind of a utility infielder who hit a little bit against lefties. So not going to happen again. We've done this already, and I don't want him in the third base conversation, but I don't think he's washed. I think if he played somewhere else, he'd be okay.
I guess, yeah, in that vein, you could see him platooning with Terang at second or something like that. That'd be fine. But yeah, probably not going to happen. Ian Pomplin asking, what are we doing with Contreras? He's racking up awards, and I'm worried he's going to rapidly get too expensive for the Brewers to retain. So already kind of looking ahead at possible contract extensions for Contreras. But Paul, I don't know about you. I get a little nervous when we're talking long-term extensions with catchers, and kind of look at what happened with his brother in St. Louis, who's going to be playing first base now.
Right. Although I feel like, okay, this is just pure speculation, but William seems to be very coachable on the defensive side.
Sure.
And Wilson seems to very much not be. Like, Wilson Contreras, I'm sure people have tried to turn him into a passable defensive catcher for many, many years on the Cubs and on the Cardinals, and it just never seems to have really taken. He's always been an offense first and kind of a butcher back there. He's gotten much worse over time because it's a young man's game back there. But William Contreras seems very coachable and has improved defensively. Took a little bit of a step back last year, but like, I'd rather have the guy who responds to feedback defensively than his brother, who seems to just want to go out there and rake. And the Contreras brothers, counting Wilson as a catcher, were the only catchers to slug over 800 last year. And so if you're looking at how the bat will age, Wilson is instructive, I think, in it might age actually kind of well. So, James, I agree with your general sentiment. Catchers generally tend to not age well, and paying them is often a fool's game. But I don't know. I could actually see this one halfway decently working out just based on the pedigree we have going there. However, I'm not worrying about that right now because that is a future problem. And worrying about who the Brewers will extend will just make you sad, so don't do it.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to happen. I'm going full Matub on this podcast. So going back to OOTP, I did just actually have to extend William Contreras, and I was able to do that. And
yeah, okay.
We're talking
full
40.
Matub indeed.
Yeah, we're talking over $40 million a year in terms of AAV on the salary to keep him past his free agency, which is after 2027. So he's in my game. I'm in 2027. He's about to jump into that territory. I don't know if that's actually what it would take to keep him. It's what I had to pay. I think he had like close to an MVP season in there, but it's what I had to pay to keep him in OOTP. So yeah, I think most likely here, I have this feeling the fact that it hasn't happened already means it's not going to happen. I think that once a guy gets into arbitration and they start to sniff one legitimately really big money, like he is now heading into arbitration, is going to be making something in the neighborhood of $8 million this year. But he's also now 3 years away from free agency, and so he can see it. He can feel that money coming. I think it's just going to be harder to get the kind of deal that the Brewers are generally willing to do in these cases. And there is also the complication. You'd have at least a decent amount of overlap between him and Yelich. Yelich would still be, if you're paying free agency prices past 2027 on him, Yelich is locked up through 29, I believe. So you've got like a 2-year overlap of free agency prices. And that's also with a more expensive Jackson Chourio by that point. Chourio is not, obviously won't be making free agency money at that point, but he will be making significantly more than he is now. So that you'd be talking about locking into a huge chunk of change for 3 hitters. It just seems unlikely that they would choose to go that direction, especially with the presence of, and we have to see how this works, but Jefferson Caro. The fact that Caro exists, I think, makes this a lot more work aroundable if he in fact is going to be able to stick at catcher and is going to be able to do that. So let's see where Caro is next spring, and that's probably going to give us kind of a guide as to what the Brewers thought process on how important it is to keep Contreras is, because if Caro is back and looking like the future at catcher for the franchise, that takes a lot of the pressure off needing to do something with Contreras, right?
Indeed.
Yep. On the flip side of the coin, if Jefferson Caro looks like he can't throw a baseball at catcher ever again, that changes the equation a little bit too.
Yeah,
but
it does.
I still have a pessimistic view of shoulder injuries with catchers. I'm just worried. Yeah,
we'll see.
All right. Bryce throws in our next question asking, so if Sal Frelick decided to give a little more grip and rip oomph into his swings for more power, how do you think that would affect his chase and K rate? Paul, is that a worthy trade-off?
It often is, and he should probably do it, because I do think there is Sal's a small guy, but I think he actually has some latent power there that he would do himself well to tap into a little bit more. It's not always a good trade-off. Like, you can obviously strike out too much, and you need to make a certain amount of contact, but Frelick's so far away from that that surely it is worth the trade-off at this point. And I don't know if it's stubborn by him or if the Brewers just kind of the one thing that makes me think it might be organizational is they do have a couple, like Bryce Terang kind of does the spray hitter speed thing, and Frelick's kind of similar. He's also very fast, and you could also make that work to some extent. But like, he's a lefty. I feel like he could easily knock like 10 to 12 homers over the short fence down the line at AmFam without too much trouble. So he should make the trade-off. He shouldn't always make the trade-off, but this guy should make the trade-off.
Yeah, I don't think he needs to chase more, but I think he can afford, because his chase rate is 68th percentile, 25.8%. I don't think chasing more is really going to help him. I think
just swing harder.
Swinging harder, and his whiff rate is 98th percentile, 12.9%. So that's the 98th percentile, and his K percent is 90th percentile. He can afford to swing harder at baseballs in the zone if he can start to pick and choose his spots. And oftentimes, this is a thing that comes with experience, where guys start to get, okay, I'm going to sit on this pitch and go after it in this circumstance. And we literally saw it in the playoffs the last time. Right. I guess the last time he batted, like, he could sit on a pitch and tank it if he's looking for it and going.
Yeah.
Hopefully he develops more of that. This was like Keith Law talked about this in relation to Bryce Terang, as he thought he was going to develop some of those skills as he got older. We still haven't really seen it with him, but his power has been improving. Like, Terang is hitting for more power than he was from 2023 to 24. I think Frelick can make similar progress. And yeah, he can definitely afford to swing and miss more than he does, and to trade some of that for some power. That is a trade-off he can make and should make. And now we just have to see if he will make it. Like that's a thing he should do, I think.
I was going to bring up Bryce Terang because we have kind of seen that, right? Like Bryce will pick and choose his spots. Like he's got multiple grand slams because he's like, well, screw it. I'm just going to try to hit this as hard as I can, and it's worked out. So, if it's in a run producing spot, perhaps maybe we get fewer free, like double play ground balls in those scenarios. Just try to lift it and separate. Yeah.
Yeah, here, you want a bold prediction for next year? I think Self-Relic is going to lead off next year more than Bryce Terang does. There's my bold prediction for you.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right. I guess along this line, Michael Parra is asking, do you see the Brewers' philosophy of stockpiling speedy, up-the-middle great defenders, both in the draft and internationally, as a success? They mostly seem to hope power develops and or acquire it from the outside to mixed results. Also, is Liverpool sincerely interested in signing Ricardo Pepi? And if so, does it happen? Ryan, your take on both of those questions.
Well, let's start with the Liverpool one first. So Ricardo Pepi just scored the goal for Team USA against Jamaica on Thursday night. He was the goal scorer for them. He's a young player who had to choose between Mexico and the U.S., and he chose the U.S. For his international team. He's playing over in Holland right now, so in the Netherlands, I should say. He's playing in the Netherlands, and the Liverpool's manager is Dutch. I could see it, but right now Liverpool has like 6 players for their 3 frontline spots, so it's not a pressing need for them. They actually need midfield help and center backs more, so it could happen. I would love to have a Team USA Rising Star on my club team, but it seems fairly unlikely. Okay, going back to the other thing, Michael spent a lot of time talking about basically exactly this on the Minor League Extra this week. This idea of stockpiling speedy up the middle defenders and then hoping you could develop power out of them. That's essentially what Jackson Chourio was. I brought this up on the Minor League Extra. Jackson Chourio was that. He was not a guy that was considered. The Brewers have signed some guys like Ernesto Martinez, another guy who was on the list. I'm blanking on his name. The Brewers have signed some guys who have big light tower power, hoping that they could develop them. Yeah. What's that?
Wes Clark, I think, was on the 40-man discussion similar to that, but
there were some other guys on the international side where they had signed basically a big hulking guy that they were hoping they could teach how to hit, and that hasn't gone well for them. But getting a guy who has a feel for the barrel and a feel for hitting, that has actually gone better for them. Bryce Terang, Sal Frelick, honestly, even Garrett Mitchell. Mitchell is so weird. Everything about Mitchell is weird. Like every single thing about Mitchell is strange. But they've actually done a pretty good job of this specific thing. So honestly, this isn't a thing that I'm really worried about. I know that people miss the days of J.J. Hardy, Ricky Weeks, Corey Hart, Prince Fielder, Ryan Braun. They miss those days of getting big sluggers, but the game has sort of evolved from that, and it's not real easy to do that anymore in the draft the way that it was back then. Things have just sort of changed. And the Brewers also aren't picking in the spots where you get guys like Prince Fielder, Ricky Weeks, Ryan Braun. Those guys were all top 7 picks. The Brewers don't pick in the top 7. So it's harder to get guys like that when you're picking 15. You sort of, and I've made this point over and over, you sort of have to pick what you're going to sacrifice when you're drafting as late as they are. And they like getting speedy, toolsy guys up the middle and hope they can turn them into guys who can impact the ball. And they've had, reasonable success with this. Garrett Mitchell, they're having some reasonable success with this. And it's also led to them having the best defensive team in baseball, or one of the best defensive teams in baseball. Right. So it fits perfectly with their overall run prevention strategy as well. So it's not what people love to see, but it's also been productive for them in this MLB environment.
Similarly, Ted Johnson asking, haven't the Brewers drafted like a bajillion shortstops under Stearns and Arnold? How is it that we don't seem to have an heir apparent at that position? Well, we kind of do with Joe Ortiz, but I feel like, Ryan, this is a complaint about Eric Brown and Freddie Zamora and the likes of those picks who haven't necessarily panned out.
Yeah, and like they do. Cooper Pratt just won the minor league Gold Glove at shortstop. And we talked about that extensively on the minor league extra. So
a lot of those guys, a lot of those picks are high school guys who clearly aren't ready though. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, but like Cooper Pratt is also, he ended last year in high A. If things continue apace, he's in double A this year. And once you're in double A, like you are firmly on like an heir apparent status. So he's definitely in that pipeline. And Spencer talked a bunch this month as well about the fact that things are looking better for Made to potentially stick up the middle, because we've sort of been taking for granted he's probably going to have to move to third, but that isn't necessarily true. And then there's also the Luis Pena of it all, who was like literally the second best player in the Dominican Summer League in terms of what Baseball America ranked the best players in the DSL this year. And Made was number one with a bullet, but Luis Pena was number two, and he is almost certainly a shortstop. Granted, further away, but like I think they have multiple heirs apparent to at shortstop. It's just they're a little bit further away. So, I mean, I get the sentiment that like Eric Brown has been a disappointment, and he has been. That's true, but I think they're also just kind of doing fine here. They're keeping this pipeline going for up the middle players.
Yeah. Also on many other teams, Bryce Terang would be a shortstop. So that too.
Exactly. Mark Podscarby asking, I know a lot of discussion around umps is negative, but who are the best umps in MLB? Has there been any statistical analysis done on which umps grade out better than others besides just strike zone ratings? Ryan, what do you have on this one?
Yeah, so it's very helpful here if you go over to umpire scorecards, and on umpscorecards.com/home, the front page of the website literally has check out the most recent games, the best umpires, and your favorite teams. So he is definitely doing what he can to highlight the good side of umpire, because everybody comes to this website to complain and check out how crappy the zone was last night for their guy. So he's trying to do this, and I think we know why that is. He's trying to keep MLB happy and make sure that the data keeps on flowing. But yeah, if you click on the best umpires, you will see a list of a bunch of guys whose names you aren't necessarily going to recognize, because people pay attention to the bad umpires. They don't necessarily pay attention to the good umpires. So here are some names of the top guys in terms of handling the strike zone last year. Adam Beck, Adam Hamari, Adrian Johnson. There's a name. Alan Porter, another name that you probably are familiar with. Alex McKay, Alex Tosi, Alfonso Marquez, another familiar name. Andy Fletcher, Angel Hernandez was actually right up there.
Look at that.
Yeah, and then Austin Jones, Ben May, who I believe is a Wisconsin native, or I'm not exactly sure. I know a friend of mine, when he comes to Milwaukee, when Ben May comes to Milwaukee, he will stop in and have a drink at the bar that my friend bartends at. So they will always have conversations. So whenever Ben May is working a Brewers game, he's like, hey, it's my guy, Ben May. So that's a name, and he's high on the list of good umpire series in the top 10. So yeah.
There you go. Brian Polakowski, next question as we move along here. I guess a pair of questions, actually. First, which former Brewer or prospect is quote unquote the one that got away in a trade that you wish the GM at the time found a different asset to send away? And then secondly, also, wouldn't positive regression to the mean just be progression to the mean? Paul, I feel like that's your question. So take it away, regression to the mean.
So no, it's not. And it's because regression, while we use it colloquially as getting worse, it's not actually what it means. It means it's going back to the sort of expected average of the system. Like you're regressing towards that, be it positively or negatively. It's a different term in statistics than it is in normal life. So if you want to say progression to the mean to be cute, that's fine, but it doesn't mean you're getting worse. It means you're getting closer to what we expect of you in the long haul. So that's that. Kind of a fun one, though. Honestly, I've noticed a lot of statistics people starting to use reversion to the mean a little bit more, and I actually think part of that is to avoid this very thing. So, is what it is there. But yeah, that's the case. I like regression to the mean better just because I've said that for my whole life, and I don't like changing terms midstream. But I do see the point for the clarity of reversion versus regression. So there you go.
There we go. Take a drink.
Yeah. So
Take a drink.
Did you have an opinion on the first one, Paul?
I
feel like Michael Brantley and the CC Sabathia trade's always one. Maybe.
Sorry, I didn't want to step on Ryan, who mentioned that.
But
in
no,
the free podcast.
But
we were talking about this before, and I didn't have a good answer, and we kind of went through like Nelson Cruz, kind of. It doesn't really apply. And Brantley's like I think the only good answer to this question, at least that I could think of. I mean,
Mitch Haniger for me, maybe he had a few years.
Yeah, Sheffield, but even that I don't think is quite right because the organization at the time that Sheffield was on the team wasn't very good, and Sheffield is his own problem for sure. But I just don't think that was ever going to work out in Milwaukee, no matter what. So I really don't think it's those two that you guys mentioned, and I can't think of another example.
Yeah, so the Brantley one is the one that comes immediately to mind for me, and I did bring that up with Paul. We were talking about that earlier, and it was like, well, Brantley was the guy that they picked. We gave them a list of players, and I was actually really happy when they didn't pick Taylor Green because Taylor Green. Tylers and Taylors. This is turning into Effectively Wild. Yeah. So when they left Green to us and took Brantley, I was happy because I didn't see a profile for Brantley, and Brantley ended up being like a 35 career WAR guy, Hall of Very Good, like pretty much. Like he ended up having one of the better careers of anybody who was in that Brewer system in the aughts. Like way more career WAR than Ricky Weeks and Corey Hart, and even I think Prince Fielder. Like basically Braun is the only guy who seriously outstripped him. And the other one we should mention too is Lorenzo Cain. Like Lorenzo Cain being traded in the deal. Yeah. He wasn't really, I don't think he had prospect status anymore because he'd been up enough with the Brewers.
Right.
But they traded him still pretty young to get Zach Greinke. And obviously they got him back, and there was, the happy homecoming with him where he was one of the most valuable players on the team in 2018 before the inevitable, decline set in. But yeah, Lorenzo Cain is another one who, again, honestly, he was also a guy who I think career 35 WAR. So from that era, it's funny, I think behind Ryan Braun in terms of career WAR, I think it's Brantley and Cain, and then you get to the group of guys like JJ Hardy, who I think is mid-20s in there, and then Weeks.
Yep.
Those guys. But so yeah, it's definitely they haven't traded away too many guys. They tend to keep their prospects, throughout the history of the franchise, because it's always been what they needed to do. They had to keep their prospects to be able to have success, because that was how they were going to have to build the team, even going back to, the days of who is why am I blanking on the GM of the golden era in the 80s? The guy who came over from Baltimore.
Because I am too.
Yeah. Harry Dalton,
yeah,
who was an extremely good. He built that Orioles powerhouse and then came over to the Brewers and built the Brewers into a powerhouse. So, yeah.
I guess one for me, because I just kept waiting for him to break out for the Brewers, and it just never did. And I understand why they eventually had to move on. But like Jorge De La Rosa becoming a solid big league pitcher for the Royals
That's a good call.
and the Rockies, he's like the best Rockies pitcher of all time. You know, he had a nice little career, ended up with 13.4 WAR on Baseball Reference. You know, talent was always there, but obviously wasn't going to come together. But I think that was what Tony Graffinino was what they got back for him.
Yeah, that one.
So,
Steve is listening to this going, "Oh, Ryan's going to talk about this now, isn't he?" Because that's one of my during that second half of 2006, the Brewers made a number of bad decisions in terms of pitching for the future. Trading away Doug Davis for Johnny Estrada was one of them. Trading away De La Rosa to get Graffinino was definitely one of them. Signing Jeff Suppan, definitely one of them.
Yeah, that was one of them.
They had some really bad, and trading Carlos Lee and not getting really any starting pitching back, also dumb. They made some poor decisions that would echo and put them behind the eight ball for the 2008 to 2011 run, where they just didn't have the pitching depth that they would need. And a lot of it centers on that second half of 2006, which is like the Doug Melvin. That I love Doug Melvin. I think he did a great job overall, but that time period is where he screwed the pooch more than anything else in terms of missing opportunities and just doing some bad things that he shouldn't have done, that ended up leaving the cupboard bare on the pitching side when they really needed it.
All right, last few questions this week, real quick. Adam Post asking, how bad can we realistically hope the Cardinals can be next season? If they sell off enough players, could they lose more than 90 games, 95 games? Paul, what do you think?
They could. They're getting older. They are, I think, still not on the rebound from their decline, and they're no longer the creme de la creme of playing baseball the right way or doing player development. So I think they got a ways to go here. I do think that they are going to be a contender to lose 90 next year. And I know that scares everybody when you predict the Cardinals are going to be bad at anything, but we should get used to it because that's not how things work anymore. This is not the 90s/aughts anymore. So, yeah, I think they could push for the bottom of the division next year pretty realistically.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it would be good for them for their long term if they did really rip the Band-Aid off here and just said, we are committing to being bad in this season. So, yeah, I think that would be the best for them. And I think that's the direction they should go. Will they have the stomach for it? Will their fans tolerate it? Will they want to burn the park to the ground? Yeah, probably. But I think this is what needs to be done for them. And unfortunately, I think we've got the signpost in the fact that what they did in terms of hiring Chaim Bloom to take over for the long term. I think they understand that and they know that this is what they have to do. They're sort of signaling that they know it, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to see them maintain being stupid for a while, but that doesn't seem likely.
I look forward to them regressing to last place in the NL Central. Next question. I guess, I always think of, the Packers as the Cardinals of the NFL, but Andrew S. is asking, who are the NFL and MLB or NBA equivalents to the Brewers, Paul?
I think it's probably the Bucks.
Oh, no.
So the Bucks did win a title, of course, with Giannis. And I think maybe the Bucks are like what the Brewers would be if Yelich didn't get hurt. Because that's kind of what that is. But like, the Bucks, they won their 1971 championship way back when, which they won, but is sort of structurally similar to the 82 World Series. They traded Jabbar. They kind of built the team after that. They had their kind of glory days of the 80s, 70s/80s, like the Brewers did. And then they were poorly managed for like a whole decade and a half and didn't win a title and didn't sniff it after that. And I think that's kind of right. For the NFL, I think it's a little trickier, but I do think it is the Vikings. The difference, the timeline works out a little bit better here. The Vikings did, of course, make 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, losing all of them. But starting in the 80s, the Vikings have always been kind of good, but flawed. They have recently become one of the better analytics teams. They're often cited as the best by people with industry knowledge of who actually has the most analytics people employed and empowers them to make decisions. But they can't get over the hump. They, of course, have never won a Super Bowl. They haven't made one since the 70s. So, like, you know, in the span of the Brewers making the World Series in 1982, the Vikings have not made the Super Bowl even once. And I do feel like they are a pretty decent match for that. Just never been able to get over the hump of having the football version of the Cardinals in their division, which is the Packers, is right there too.
Yeah, I think the Indiana Pacers make a lot of sense to me as a comparable for the Brewers, because I believe never have won a title. Indiana doesn't have an NBA title for sure.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. What they made it like they made a finals against the Bulls, right? When they had Reggie Miller and Rick Smits and a bunch of other
Eastern finals, but yeah. And then I think got smoked.
Yeah.
They got smoked by the Lakers once, if memory serves. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that part of it kind of works from that. But they also have like a very loyal fan base, and like a fan base that kind of makes them play up above what the expectation. Like there's a high expectation. People are very into the Pacers because it's basketball there. People are very into the Brewers here in Wisconsin. So I think that comp actually works pretty well. The NFL one is harder. I don't know that I can beat Paul on the Vikings comp. That's probably about as good as you can get. We were talking a little bit before we started that like the time horizons are difficult for this because baseball has such a long history compared to these other leagues. And so the Brewers are, you know, a Johnny come lately in terms of like the whole scope of baseball history. But if they were, you know, an NBA or an NFL franchise, they would be kind of, you know, part of a much longer history going back in that league comparatively. So
also, I know some of you are yelling Lions for a Brewers comp, and I think that's also justifiable. Well, why not?
Well, because the Lions were so bad for so long. I mean, do
you remember the 2000s Brewers? Like that's.
Yeah, the Brewers had like the 90s and 2000s from 92 to 2007. The Brewers were 15 years of being pretty fallow, but like didn't the Lions go like 50 years without making the playoffs? Isn't that a thing?
Like they went a very long time without making the playoffs. They did make it once in the 90s or twice or something.
Oh yeah, the
like
Wayne Fonts team that went to the NFC Championship game, right? Yeah, that was weird. But
I do think that it's not a horrible comp because they did have the Barry Sanders teams, and that's kind of like the Brewers 80s teams that never managed to get it done. And they've only really gotten good over the last few years, and they still haven't gotten it done, even though they've actually turned into a well-run team. I think it's a decent comp too.
I suppose the fact that they've in recent years turned into a well-run team after years of being mismanaged, I guess that sort of works. Though, honestly, the Brewers haven't been mismanaged since...
Well, here's the other thing. Yeah. Like, really quick, while the White Sox were the worst team in MLB history last season, there's a pretty good case to make that the Brewers are the worst team in baseball history. There really is. We've never won a title. There's not that many teams who've never won a title. We were mismanaged horribly for like 2/3 of our entire existence. Our 85 Bears didn't win the Super Bowl. They.
Yeah,
the recent success hasn't been very successful. Like we have like our stupid stat of losing 12 first round appearances in a row or some garbage. Like the Brewers aren't good. They're bad. And the Lions are also bad. So it's a good comp from that perspective too.
Yeah, I would say the Brewers, like who is the worst team in MLB history? I would put the Mariners below the Brewers easily.
Like Mariners and Padres are the only two in the conversation, though.
Mariners and Padres would be the two in the conversation. I mean, it sort of depends on like what you want. Like the Royals have been an abject failure, except for like
4 seasons,
like 4 or 5 seasons. Yeah, I mean they've lost 100 games so many times. They've been an absolutely dreadful franchise, except they have the 2 World Series. So
yes, they do.
Yeah, but we've debated that in the past. So
yeah.
I just love, though, that Paul is successfully compared to the Brewers to each and every NFC North team outside of the Packers. That's great. All right. Another sports crossover question, another one from Baseball Needs More Chest Lettuce, asking who's in a worse position, Brewers hitting development or Wisconsin Badgers football offense, if you can call it that. Oof, we talked a little Badgers offense, but yeah.
It's the Badgers offense, and it's a lot. Like they're rough, man. It's not good. They need to make a total change. And the hitting development, I think it's gotten a little better. Like we have Jackson Chourio now, so that's something to be optimistic about. So yeah, this is an easy question.
Yeah,
Badgers offense, man. There's, like you said, worst quarterback in a major conference at the very least.
Yeah.
Offensive line has stunk for a long time. Running backs with no explosiveness, receivers who can't get open. Ryan, it's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, the Brewers hitting development has gotten a lot better in the last few years. I think all the signposts are there. Like, you may not be excited about Bryce Terang and Sal Frelick and Garrett Mitchell, but they are products of this farm system and were developed up through it and are legit big league players. So, yeah, the Brewers hitting development, and then obviously Chourio and the kids who are coming up behind. Like, there's a lot to get excited about that. Down there. Did you guys see that Jesus Mate was just ranked the number 1 prospect in the Brewers system by Baseball America? That was interesting.
I did.
Nope.
And every time I see his name, I just still think Jesus made what. So yeah, that'll be a thing in my head forever. But yes. We've got the next Chourio maybe coming up right behind.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
All right, last question this week. This is a good one to end on. M. Santana asking, do you all have any favorite county stadium memories? I'm a little late in life Brewer fan, so I missed out on it. Would love to live vicariously through you all. So, Paul, let's start with you. Any county stadium memories that take you back?
The best things about County Stadium were all that they did things that would horrify normal people. And that's a lot of it. Like, I remember, this will capture all of them in a nutshell. First of all, our mascot used to slide into a giant mug of beer and release balloons for children to gape at, which, they decided not to do that on the new stadium because it was kind of weird, even for Milwaukee. But they had a speaker tower. The Brewers did not have speakers throughout County Stadium. They decided to stack them all up in the outfield and just play as loudly as possible. It was impossible to hear basically anywhere in the stadium except for the bleachers, and so that was weird. But more than anything, I remember being there for a game. It was one of the games where Rob Deere hit 2 home runs. It was stormy and very windy, and it did not rain while I was there. I think we actually left because it was like, this is definitely going to rain a lot really soon. But the light towers in the outfield were like swaying a disturbing amount back and forth. Like it looked like they were going to fall over. That place was held together with baling wire and dreams, and it was fun to go to games too. But it was kind of a dump, and it was hard to do a lot of things at County Stadium. There were also poles in front of you a lot of the time. They had a lot of obstructed seats, like a ton of obstructed seats. So I know people have nostalgia for it, but it did suck. So, yeah.
So I didn't grow up in Milwaukee, and my parents were much more like Badgers fans and Packers fans than they were Brewers fans. Like, we went to some games when I was a kid, but it was not a regular part of our itinerary to come down from Madison to do that. So most of my memories really focus on when I was old enough to drive down and come down to games myself. I attended the first game in the National League, the opening day against the Expos in 1998. That was when I was a senior in high school, and a bunch of people skipped out on school that day and went down to see that game from my high school. So I definitely remember that. I remember trying to buy a beer because I had a wispy beginnings of a beard at that point. And so I tried to see if I could just look without an ID, and I got carded and wasn't able to buy a beer that day. So that definitely is something I remember. I remember going to see Mike Mussina almost throw a no-hitter against the Brewers, and people being really upset when we got the hit to break it up, and so he didn't get his no-hitter. This was when Mike Mussina was still in the Orioles, so there was that. I remember people being very upset that he gave that up because we didn't get to see history. So I've never seen a no-hitter. Hundreds of games attended, have never seen a no-hitter. And let's see. There was also the time that me and a friend happened to go down and buy tickets on a Sunday afternoon. I was attending UW Whitewater at that point. Me and a friend went down and bought tickets, and we were bought them like right before the game from some guy out there, and we paid a ridiculously small amount for these tickets, and we didn't know how good they were. And then we went and sat down. They were basically front row Amy's seats in the current configuration of things. And so the next day I turned on the replay, and my roommate in my dorm came in, and I go, "Hey, look at the screen real quick." And there I am sitting there watching the game when we were watching the replay on whatever it was, Fox Sports or whatever at that point. So
awesome.
Yeah, sitting right. Those are still the best seats I've ever had. I mean, we were in the first row right behind home plate, and it was pretty great.
Must be in the front row. Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll do it for questions this week. Thanks everybody for sending those in. Again, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you that question priority both here and on reporting as eligible. And Ryan, we do have a handful of new patrons to shout out this week. Who do we have joining the ranks?
So welcome to Dan Abbott's and Shannon Ferguson. And also, and I love this one, Merman Hellville is also joining us.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's exceptional. And also, thank you to Alex Lamers for doing the upgrade to the Barrel Man. We always try to mention the upgrades when we catch them, when we see them. Thank you, Alex, for doing that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks again, you four. Again, MKE Tailgate over at Patreon. Search for us there. And as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, please do sign up and pay those dues through a browser or through, the browser on your phone. Don't use the iOS Patreon app unless you want to pay an extra 30% to Tim Apple. So yeah, no. All right. Even if you're not a patron, I need to remind everyone, go support us another way. Wherever you're listening to this right now, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, somewhere else, please do hit that follow and subscribe button and give us a 5-star review if you haven't already while you're there. Make sure you never miss an episode. That'll do it for this week. As we mentioned, lots of news coming out in the next week or so, even maybe by the time you listen to this. So next time we get together, we will recap some of those decisions, whether it's the 40-man spots. I know Willie Adames has to make a decision on his qualifying offer in the next week. So there's that. And then we've also got some non-tender candidates. We covered those a few weeks back. So go back and listen to that if you want to see who we think should be tendered or non-tendered for arbitration. In the meantime, though, everyone, please do have a good week. We'll see you next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate.